Welcome, my beautiful listeners and people that watch on YouTube, to another episode of Eclectic Conversations. I'm your host, Kimberly Correa, and I am your friend on this unpredictable journey through photography, business, entrepreneurship, and all of the things self-care. And I give a little bit of unsolicited, heartfelt advice. But today we're going to be talking all about second shooters for weddings, and these will just be my unfiltered thoughts about being a second photographer in the wedding industry, what I think that main photographers should be doing, and we're just going to be breaking down the myths and the expectations and the reality of being a second photographer in the wedding industry. So I want to first start off saying that I have been a second photographer for a lot of different photographers, and I have also hired photographers. So I am going to be talking a little bit about my experiences that are good and bad. And I just don't want anybody that is listening or watching the podcast to think I'm talking about them or think that I'm talking bad about them, because that's not what it is at all. And most of it, even if I am talking, bad about it, it's really, I have no ill will against anyone that I've worked with at all. Whether I've worked with you as a second shooter or if you've worked with me as a second shooter, I take all of it as a learning lesson. And most of it is my fault as a main photographer for not relaying expectations or communicating very well. I just want to speak on my experience about it and just have more unfiltered thoughts about being a second photographer. It's honestly the reason why I've been procrastinating this podcast for so long, is because I just don't want anybody to think that I hate them or that they're a bad photographer, or, I just don't want anybody to think that. So don't think that. I swear, most of it, I find that it's my fault for not being communicative with my second and also the main photographer. So I just needed to get that out of the way before we get started. But okay, now let's dive into the first segment. And I'm going to be talking about the role of being a second photographer, because I think there's a lot of different things online. When I was starting photography, I didn't know what a second shooter was, and there was a lot of information online. And most of it was, second shooting is a great way to build your portfolio. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, that's amazing. But I think now that I've been a second photographer and I've hired second photographers, that is just not the way to think of what a second is. That's almost more like shadowing. If you want to shadow a photographer, that's a good way to maybe build your portfolio or even see how a wedding works, because most of the time, so let me just get into the role. I wrote it down because I'm going to forget most of this, so I have my little iPad out. So a second photographer is a supporting photographer hired to assist a main photographer during a wedding. Their role includes capturing candid moments, different angles, and additional shots that their primary or lead photographer can't take, or they're not able to because they're not there, they're not in the same room, whatever. So the primary expectation of a second photographer is to assist the main photographer, not to build their portfolio. The second photographer's main goal is to complement the work of the main photographer that they're working under and ensure that they're getting, good coverage of the event. And so second photographers add immense value to providing backup, enabling the main photographer to focus on key moments. And while the second photographer covers alternative shots or angles, just depending on the photographer. So I just want to clearly state that I think a lot of main wedding photographers are upset when they hire a second photographer and the second photographer is only looking to build their portfolio and not work with the main photographer or getting in capturing moments that their client would be happy to receive. And that's where I think a lot of people get it twisted, get it a little bit confused, because what I've seen in the wedding industry, being a second and also just being the main photographer, is that a lot of second photographers are going into a wedding day thinking, oh, what can I get for my website, for my Instagram, instead of going in and thinking about how can I make this client's gallery better? How can I shoot things that will add more photos into the gallery that's not just a different angle of the same thing that the main photographer is getting. And this also really depends on who you're working with, which is why I think a lot of main photographers should be setting expectations at the very, very beginning when they're hiring a second photographer. Because most of the time, when I have a second shot for someone, they don't give me any details. They don't tell me like what lenses they prefer. They don't really tell me what to capture. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, okay, go capture groomsmen. And I'm like, okay, but what do you usually do? What type of photos are you looking for? And honestly, like a lot of people that I've worked with as a second photographer don't tell me any of that. So I just shoot the way I would want my second photographer to shoot, but I don't know if that's what the main photographer even wants. And I think it's also really, really important if you are second shooting to maybe second shoot with people that shoot in the same way you do. I know there's a lot of photographers that shoot more traditional, more posy, and then there's also photographers that are kind of in the middle, like me, where it's like pose, but very documentary style. And then there's photographers that don't really care to get like any other details that are happening around them, and they just really want you as a backup in case they do miss a moment. So they do want, certain angles, and they want the same thing. They want the same photos they're taking, just at a different angle or maybe just a different lens. So I think we're all getting like confused, and just we're all this like, I don't know, confusion is coming from is because no one is communicating with each other. And so that's why I'm like, just being a main photographer hiring seconds and then getting the photos back and being like, oh my God, like this is not what I wanted at all. Well, yeah, because I didn't say anything. I didn't tell him how to shoot, or not even how to shoot, but just like, I didn't tell him what camera, or, oh my gosh, I didn't tell them what lenses to use. I didn't tell them what I was expecting. I didn't give them any examples of kind of like what I expect from a second shooter. And so I really think that we all need to create a guide, and or not all of us, but as main photographers if you're in the wedding industry, we need to send out a guide, expectations of what seconds are there to do. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk about is just like the compensation and professionalism of second shooters. A lot of photographers, or what I've seen like on the internet and just like talking to my wedding photographer friends, is that they are paying around $50 to like $80 an hour for a second photographer. And the second photographers are very entitled. They're just like there for them. The second photographers are not there to help the main photographer or add value to the gallery, or even like they don't really care about their clients or anything like that. And that you should not go into a wedding day like that at all. I promise making connections that are good with main photographers will get you a lot further than just going in there and being very, very selfish and entitled to the images. And I think a lot of that goes back to communication. And most of these issues stem from photographers not sending contracts, not sending expectations, but mostly contracts. If you are not getting a contract as a second photographer, you should. And I have made this mistake before. I have not sent contracts. I've sent contracts. And I think sometimes maybe we just get lazy and we're like, oh, whatever, like they'll know what to do. But again, communication. This is why a lot of photographers do have bad experiences, is because they don't send a contract. They just send them like a little list of things they do expect, like, oh, maybe don't post the vendors. And then that second photographer posts the vendors because they weren't under contract with you. And so we really, really need to start sending contracts to every contractor that you're hiring to set these expectations. Because one of my friends, she sent me a DM when I said I was going to record this podcast, and she said, when you second shoot, you agree to adhere by each of their requests. Like if they don't want you posting until a certain time, or tagging vendors or clients, or sending a separate gallery to their clients, you shouldn't. Like if they're telling you all of this stuff, please don't please don't do that stuff. So a lot of the time, main photographers will tell you like, yes, you can use the images, but please don't post them until, 3 months, because my deadline is in 3 months or whatever. And so they just don't want you posting any photos until they get the gallery delivered, so the client isn't seeing all these like extra images or extra sneak peeks of their wedding day, and they're getting everything all at once with the gallery. So if people are telling you that for a reason, and that was the reason. Like they just don't want those extra images, or maybe if they didn't include one of your images in the gallery, they just don't want the client seeing that before they get their entire gallery, because then it'll make more sense of maybe why they didn't include that image, because the main photographer already got that image, just maybe in a different angle or whatever. And another one is tagging vendors or clients. The vendor thing, I kind of go back and forth with, because I'm like, it's the vendors. Like I want to shout them out as much as I can, but I get it. And a lot of, I definitely get, do not tag the client, just because, again, like I said, maybe they did include a certain image that you love in their gallery. And then I've heard of like clients asking the second photographer for those extra images. I've heard of second photographers sending an entire gallery of a wedding day to the clients that are not their clients at all. And that just creates a lot of tension, a lot of like things with the client and just the other, like the main photographer's business, and it just gets messy. So if someone's telling you not to do it, and of course, even if you're not under contract for some reason, pause. Always get a contract if you're a second photographer. Just do it. It'll make your life a lot easier. I have heard of really bad photographers, main wedding photographers, not sending contracts, and then the second photographer doesn't get paid. There's a lot of reasons why you should have a contract, mostly like so you can get paid. But I don't even know where I was going with that. I already forgot my train of thought, but I don't know why I said pause, because I knew I was going to get off topic. I always do, and I always forget what I'm talking about. But yeah, just even if you're not sent a contract, if they send you like a little set of rules, go by those rules, because you will burn so many bridges if you don't adhere to the rules that the main photographer gave you. And a lot of the time when I have second shot for photographers, they end up referring me to clients that they can't take on, or they end up becoming my friends in the wedding industry. And that's how you build a community. That's how you build a network. And so you don't want to burn bridges. And I've heard of second tagging vendors and then sending galleries off to clients that aren't even theirs, and they just end up burning bridges, because one photographer talks to another photographer and they're like, oh my god, she did the same thing to me, blah blah blah. So just don't burn any bridges, especially in the wedding industry. Get a contract, make sure you're getting paid. And something that I wanted to talk about with payment is, I think a lot when people are wanting to start second shooting, or they're like barely second shooting for someone, don't think that just because they give you a rate, that's what you have to go by. So if you have like a lot of experience second shooting, like you've second shot so many weddings and you're like, $50 isn't going to get me out of bed anymore. Like I have so much experience and I want to start charging $65 an hour. Don't be afraid to do that. They don't have to book you if they don't want you, but if you're just like, I'm not doing that for $50 just because I have so many weddings under my belt, I've already done all of this stuff and I've proven that I'm a good second photographer, don't be afraid to ask. Like you are the contractor in this situation, so you do have room to negotiate. They don't have to book you, but you don't have to go with that rate if you don't think it's worth your while. So that's another thing with pricing. Don't be afraid to kind of like set expectations as a second photographer too. I have worked with photographers that don't let you use any of the images, and then I've had some photographers that do. So if a photographer is telling you like, oh, you can't use images, okay, great. If you don't want to work with them, you don't have to. But yeah, so just ask the main photographer to send you a contract. And if they don't, and you've been trying to tell them to send a contract, I mean, just know maybe it might not be the job for you. Maybe you shouldn't be working with a photographer that doesn't even send you a contract. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Always get a contract and don't be afraid to charge your worth. Right now, like I probably won't do any weddings that are $50 an hour. I have my own experience. I'm a main wedding photographer. I charge what I charge. I also live in DFW where I have to drive a lot for these wedding venues. So it doesn't make sense for me to, go out and second shoot for $50. But again, like sometimes I will, sometimes I won't. It just depends on my mood. But I'm not afraid to tell people what I charge. And if they, especially if they're looking for someone last minute, like the week of, I'm like, okay, this is what I charge. And if that's okay, cool, we can book it. But if not, then that's okay too. So again, don't be afraid to set your own boundaries and expectations as a second photographer. I think a lot of people are scared to do that. I mean, I was scared at the very beginning too, to maybe charge my worth or just maybe even ask for a contract or just, I don't know, talk to the main photographer about things that I need. And also going back to communication and things like that, don't be afraid to ask them like, what do you want? I know this is how you shoot, but is there a lens that you prefer me to work with? Or what time of day do I need to go do this? Or what do you expect from the gallery? Things like that. And also as a main photographer, don't be afraid to ask for wedding galleries. I have made the mistake before of not asking for full raw wedding galleries from people or even just sessions. And I have gotten photos back that I don't love and maybe have only used 5 or 10 photos from a 10-hour day. And that just sucks because again, I'm paying second photographers $50 to $60 an hour, which is actually insane. That is so much money to just show up and leave. I mean, you have to do a little bit of work, but still, it's like a pretty easy job compared to a lot of like fast food restaurants that are only paying you like $8 to $10 an hour. I have just been sad with the galleries I have received, and it just takes away from my client's experience too. And I try to get everything on my own. Usually, like if I haven't worked with a second photographer ever, I try to just get everything on my own. But in the past, I've trusted people to do what I think are easy things, and then I get those things or those photos back and they're just not what I expected. And I think also before you start second shooting, it is really, really, I'm kind of off track. I don't even know if that goes with the segments I'm in, but I'm just kind of like, my thoughts are just going everywhere. I think before you start second shooting, you really, really, really need to know your settings and how to use your camera. I cannot count the amount of times that I have gotten images and I look at the settings, and trust me, I'm not like this photographer that cares about like you need to be shooting aperture 2.8 and always have your ISO at this and like it needs to make sense. I don't really care. Like I don't even shoot that way. I kind of like lose track sometimes when I'm shooting a wedding. It's kind of like secondhand at this point, but since I don't really think about it on a wedding day, but I've just gotten images where the settings truly just do not make sense. And so I really think before you start second shooting to get that learned and just ready. And honestly, like, you could just do it at home. Like, get someone to model in front of a window, get someone to model in like a really dark room, go outside and just start practicing, because that's what happens on a wedding day. You're going to be outside. You're going to be in front of a large window. You're going to be outside. You're going to be in a cloudy, like on a cloudy day. Like, you need to learn how to shoot in every single type of environment. I just really think that learning your settings will go a long way with your photography. And there are so many YouTube videos. There are so many courses online. You don't have to go to college for this. I didn't take any photography classes when I went to art school. So you don't really, I mean, I learned everything from YouTube. I took some photography classes in high school, but I was shooting on auto. I had no idea. Actually, for the longest time, it did not make sense, like the triangle of all the things. See, I don't even know the terms. Like, I am just not the type of photographer that cares that much about it, but I do care to get a sharp image, and I care that the photo is not grainy when the lighting is ideal. And so I've just gotten just wild aperture settings where we're shooting at like 1/30 and ISO is like at 1,000, and your aperture or your shutter speed is like, I don't know. I've just gotten some crazy image settings, which whatever, it's fine. But again, that's a learning lesson on me. Maybe I should not have hired that photographer to shoot with me, and I wish I would have asked for some raw images to maybe look through how they shoot, and that would have saved me money, and that would have helped my clients too in the long run, because maybe their gallery would have been filled with images that they loved, and I can't deliver some of the images that I've gotten back because they're just not to the quality that I shoot and the quality that my clients expect. And so, yeah, I just think learn your settings. It's really simple. Just go on YouTube or even TikTok. I feel like I've seen a lot of good TikToks about like how all the settings work together. So definitely learn your settings. That's like my biggest tip to start getting noticed by photographers. And when I first started second shooting, the way I got to second shoot for other photographers is because they saw that I was second shooting for other photographers, and those main photographers recommended me to a lot of photographers. I mean, it happens now still. Like, I will second shoot for a lot of my friends now, and they have referred me to a lot of other photographers. And that's what you want. Like, if you really, and I love second shooting now. I used to not like it, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, sign me up. Like, I love second shooting. It gives me like more creativity and a lot less pressure than my own wedding day. So I like having the balance of doing both each year. But yeah, a lot of my friends will refer me to other photographers, and those photographers reach out because of word of mouth. It's like the best marketing tool ever. And so that's why you don't want to burn bridges. Like, if you work for a photographer and they tell you not to do something and you do it, they're not going to refer you. They're not going to think you're a good second photographer. And so, yeah, I think just don't break the rules. Do what they tell you to do, please. All right, let's look at my iPad to see what else I wrote down for... so my third segment was going to be the do's and don'ts for a second photographer. So let's see what it says. Oh, yes. Another thing is, don't use the wedding to promote your personal business or share images without the photographer's consent. I know I already talked about that, but that's so important. I've heard so many main photographers just rant about this online. And so I know a lot of second photographers are doing this. So when you get hired for a wedding day, you are working under the main photographer's brand. And so you don't want to go around like talking to people about how you own your own wedding photography business or giving the guest your Instagram or anything like that. You're just there to work as a photographer, and if anybody asks, you tell them, oh, I work for so-and-so photography. Here's their Instagram. So this isn't like a networking event for you. This is so you can work with the main photographer under their brand. It's the same as if you were working for any other company. And I don't know why this happens so much, but yeah, just don't do it. Or if the photographer says it's okay, then go ahead and do it. That's fine too. And another thing I did want to talk about is that if you are needing to second shoot to build your business, to build your portfolio, that is okay. So many people that are in the wedding industry right now started second shooting and then eventually got images, were able to share images from the weddings that they second shot. I get it. We all get it. All the main photographers get it. But don't take advantage of the position or the primary photographer for the wedding day. And don't ignore the only reason why you're there at the wedding. So really, when you go into a wedding day, think about the client. What would they want? And again, this always goes back to communication as the main photographer. So if you're a main photographer hiring a second shooter, again, set expectations and communicate with what you're wanting, how your clients are, what your clients expect, the vision that your clients have for the wedding day, so that the second photographer knows like the importance and maybe the background of your couple. Because a lot of the time I don't even get that as a second shooter. So I really don't know what the client is wanting, what the photographer is wanting. So then I kind of go in blind and I don't know what they want. Some people want the exact same photo they're taking just in case they lose their images. And then some people are like, nope, I don't want you anywhere near me. Go shoot something else. Go in another room. Go, shoot the groom, go shoot their partner. I don't want you near me. Like, I've got this. So really, we just, I feel like this episode is really just, you just need to communicate. But yeah, because the reason I'm saying this is because even when I started second shooting, so my very first wedding ever attending, going to taking photos at, I did not understand the role of a second shooter at all. I was basically glued to the lead photographer, and I wish I would have known all of these things before I went in, because I would have shot it a lot differently. And I feel like when I shot my very first wedding as a second photographer, I was basically getting all the exact same photos that the main photographer was getting. And she didn't complain. She didn't say anything. She's my friend now. She would have told me, but I didn't go into it thinking, oh my gosh, what would the couple want? What would the photographer want? And so I just really wish I knew all of these things before I did that, which is the reason why I'm making this podcast, is that I just want to set a standard for second shooting. Because even when I first started, all the blogs, all the YouTubes, I don't think there was podcasts back then when I first started, but maybe there was, I don't know. They weren't as popular. But what I'm trying to say is that every single thing I saw about second shooting was build your portfolio, build your portfolio, build your portfolio. So I did go into a lot of my second shooting roles very selfishly of like, oh, what can I get to improve my portfolio? Which is so funny now, because I have edited maybe like 25 photos in the whole span of my career of second shooting gigs, because I'm just I don't know. I need to do that actually this year, is to edit a lot of the second shooting jobs that I've done, because a lot of the work that I've done I'm really proud of as a second shooter, because I know all of these things. And so I just wish I would have known all of this stuff. And yeah, again, it's the reason why I'm sharing all this information, because I know what it's like to be a second photographer, and I also know what it's like to be a main photographer and be very, not angry, I'm never angry, but I'm just kind of like sometimes sad about the results that I get of the photos, or the way that my second shows up, or like, I don't know, I've never had like horror stories, but I have had galleries of my seconds that I can't use even 10% of their photos, which is why I hired them. And $50 per hour is a lot to spend on getting photos that you can't even use. And so I've been very, very upset, but mostly at myself because I'm not setting the expectation. And I think a lot of main photographers just need to start sending out a guide of what to expect and hiring photographers that kind of line up with the type of style that you're shooting. So again, like if you're a documentary photographer, maybe don't hire a second photographer that's not like that at all, or maybe hire people to shadow you to see how you work so that way you can take them under your wing as a second photographer to, to really nail down your style. I feel like there was a photographer that I worked with when I first started where we shot, even right now I have a photographer that I feel like we just shoot so in sync. Like I know what she's thinking, I know what she wants. And that's because I've worked so many weddings with her. And even if we don't shoot the exact same way, like I do things a lot differently on my own wedding days, but I know exactly what she wants, what she expects from me. I read her mind. Like if she's doing something, I'm doing something else. And I just think that's like perfect. And that's what you want from a second photographer. We can't expect just random people from the internet that you're hiring to just know exactly how your business works, how you shoot, what lenses you like, all of those things. It's just unrealistic to expect that and then get mad at the person shooting for you because they didn't know any of that because you didn't tell them. So my fourth segment was tips for main photographers, but I think I kind of went through all of that as I was talking about everything else. I just wanted to really emphasize why main photographers have so many issues with second photographers, and it's mostly because you're not setting expectations, you're not sending out contracts, you're not telling them anything. And I have definitely been frustrated with main photographers as a second photographer. They send me the timeline the day before, they cancel a day before the event, they don't need me, and those things just shouldn't happen. I think we just all need to do better as an industry, especially main photographers. All these issues come from us not setting expectations. And something that I did miss was this is really small, but it happened when I first started, is also setting the expectation of what to wear to a wedding. I've had people show up in things that I would never wear to a wedding, but I didn't say what to wear and what not to wear to this photographer when I first started. So then I was like, oh, I really need to start telling people what I expect them to wear, or at least just like kind of like a style guide. And if you don't want your second photographer wearing any color or certain colors or certain types of clothing, definitely tell them what to wear, because if they are just starting as a second photographer, they don't know how the industry works. They probably don't have a lot of weddings under their belt, so they don't know these things at all. And another tip for main photographers is just be a good boss. I have worked with so many main lead photographers, and they're just not good bosses. They don't communicate on time. They don't send contracts, they don't pay on time, and all of these things I need to remind myself too. I've been guilty of not being the greatest boss, but I think this year we really need to change the industry and how we talk about second photographers and how we hire second photographers, and don't just expect them to know everything, and really communicate with them and just be a better, just how you give your clients a really good experience. You should also be giving the people you hire a really good experience. And I think that is all I wanted to talk about. If I think of anything else, I'll record another podcast, because I'm sure I missed 100 other things. And that's just what came up at the forefront of my mind when recording this. So we have reached the end of today's podcast, and it has been incredible. I hope that this helps second photographers and main photographers just about the nuances, the challenges, and the role of being a second photographer and capturing those once-in-a-lifetime moments for clients. So thank you for tuning in to Eclectic Am I good? I don't even know my own podcast name. Thank you for tuning into Eclectic Conversations with me today, and I hope to see you in the next episode.